Well, hello everybody. I hope you're all doing great and Happy New Year. You know, all things considered, 2020 has not been a bad year for me. I was looking back and I think, you know what? I didn't really do an awful lot in 2020 that I don't do in other years, except for the workshops. All of my workshops were cancelled, but it seems that I pretty much compensated for all those cancellations with something else. This year I came out with my Quiet Light book, which has been a huge success. We did the F4 project, which was an awful lot of fun, and at the end of the day that's also been a pretty good success as well. And then there was a lot of other business opportunities that came my way that I really wasn't expecting. So overall it's been not a bad year. I did get to travel a little bit. I went to the States in January, and then of course I think it was in July or June, I went to Iceland. We had a bit of a window there where I nipped over to Iceland and managed to get that trip in, and then of course the Canadian Rockies. So I don't have an awful lot to complain about. And on top of that, my partner Karen, she's had to work at home, so I've been spending an awful lot more time with her, which has just been great. Some of you may or may not realize that I'm actually quite introvert, so I spend a lot of time at home and I don't do an awful lot of socializing anyway. So you know, I go to the store, I get my groceries, and I come home, and then I do my trips, and that's pretty much my life. Now and then I'll meet up with Gavin and some other friends, but I pretty much like to stick to myself and do my own thing. So it hasn't really affected me that much. Now granted, I love to travel just like everybody else, but up until I started YouTube, I didn't really do an awful lot of traveling other than when I worked for the gardening magazine, where I'd fly across Canada to photograph gardens, but that had absolutely nothing to do with landscape photography. So I am looking forward to 2021. I think that the beginning of the year will pretty much be an extension of what we've just had in 2020, but I think things will gradually get better. And as far as mental health goes, what I've done personally is I do a lot of running. Maybe I guess it was about 5-6 years ago, I did an awful lot of running to the point where I was running ultra marathons. But the problem with running ultra marathons is that you spend all of your time running. So I stopped running for a year or two, and then this year I started running again, and now I run every other day, but not the same distances that I was running back then. But that really helps with just keeping my sanity, and it gets all that anger out and whatever else happens to be going on in my life that I'm not that keen on. I'll just go for a run, and then I don't know, I just feel so much better after I've gone for a run. So overall, it's been not a bad year. I'm very optimistic for 2021, and I hope you guys are too. So to celebrate 2020, I'd really like to show you my top 10 images of the year. Now, if you watch my videos on a regular basis, you'll know that my last trip, I came away with a lot of images that I really, really like, and I could probably fill up the top 10 quite easily with just that trip. So what I've decided to do is eliminate those images from this top 10 and start at the very beginning of the year and go through. So without further ado, let's start with image number 1, when I went on the trip to the United States with Gavin Hardcastle, Thomas Heaton, Nick Page, and Greg Snell, known as the F4 Roadtrip.
Any idea what's going on? No. You know how I feel about America. It's cold. It's miserable. I'm miserable.
Look at it! Just look at it!
I think we can tell that from the state of your face, Tom. I've been dragged from the UK.
Could have gone to fucking Scotland!
To America.
Roadtrip!
All right, one of the first stops on this epic trip down the west coast of the United States was Cape Disappointment. And Cape Disappointment didn't disappoint. Along with the F4 group, we had probably about 200 of our new friends surrounding us, all taking photographs of the same thing. And that was the crashing waves hitting those cliffs in front of us. It was really quite a fantastic day. Luckily for us, the day started off quite miserable, but as it kind of progressed, the weather just got better and better, and the light got better. So we got great waves, great light, and it was really a great day to be out photographing waves. Now, out of all of the images that I took, I came away with probably a dozen or so that I really liked, but this one really stood out to me because it just has that true force of nature, and you can see the power behind that wave, and of course the light was just beautiful. I also really liked the seagull in the background there. It kind of gives the waves a little bit of scale. So this is number one on my list, and it was a great start to the year. Image number 2, Lone Pine Peak and cactus in the Alabama hills of the Eastern Sierras in California. What an absolutely fantastic place, and I can see why so many photographers travel to the Alabama hills. The light, the landscape, the dramatic mountains is just great subject matter for landscape photography. The reason why I chose this image was it's not that often that I take grand landscape photographs. I'm more interested in the intimate images. Like if this was back at home, I would probably just take a photograph or a close-up of the cactus and leave the peak out. But in this case, I really love the light on the peak in the background. And of course, those beautiful boulders in the foreground. And it's not often that I get to photograph cactus as well. So the combination of those rocks, the mountains, and the cactus just works so well for me. Now, I took quite a few images that I like on the F4 trip, but these two really stood out to me as being probably my best images of the trip. And hopefully in the future I'll take more grand landscape type images, especially in the Alabama hills. I just love to go back there and just camp out for a couple of weeks. It's just an awesome area to hang out and make images. Image number 4, quite a bit closer to home this time, and that's probably why I really like this photograph. It was a new area for me that I'd never really spent any time at. It's just outside of town, and it's called Little Mountain. It's just kind of a hump in the valley beyond my house, and there's some beautiful views up there, but there's also arbutus or madrone trees that grow on top of this little mountain. And I particularly liked this grouping of trees because it's hanging right on the edge of a cliff. The cliff is about 200 feet tall, and the light at this time of year, this is in February, just happens to strike the side of these trees, and being red, it just had a beautiful glow to them. I framed this shot so that I'd have that kind of dead snag in the background framed in between those two red trees, and of course then we have the top of the cliff there. All in all, I just loved the shapes and the colors of this image, and that's why I picked it as one of my top 10. One of the things that many people don't realize about Canada or British Columbia is that on the west coast of Vancouver Island, It's quite temperate and warm, and many of the ferns and the mosses stay green throughout the year. And this was the case with this image here. This is a big leaf maple tree near Nitnat Lake on the way to Carmanah Provincial Park. Now, I photographed this tree several times, and actually I have another image in my list here of this exact tree, different angle. But what's unique about this tree is that it's a very large big leaf maple, and it has some huge limbs on it with all these mosses. The hard part is trying to get a good angle on the tree, but I really liked this angle because the Sitka spruce on the right side and the smaller trees on the left side frame it quite nicely. The hard part is trying to find an angle where you're not including a lot of the sky, which can be a bit of a distraction. I also liked the color temperature of the ferns in the foreground. They're quite cool, whereas we're getting a bit of direct light or ambient light in the middle there, and it's a little bit warmer, so we have that contrast between the cool and warm colors. The great thing about photographing trees in the winter, when they've lost all their leaves, is that they show their structure, and if a tree has lots of character to it, then you can get some great compositions out of those trees. Image number 5. Well, the image pretty much speaks for itself, I think. It was really just an absolutely beautiful morning, and it was something that I wasn't really expecting. I drove up to the top of a little mountain, again not far from where I live, and there was no indication of fog or anything like that, and it wasn't until I walked to the end of the trail that I noticed the fog, and of course I saw this beautiful light, and I had to photograph it. Unfortunately, the light didn't last very long. It only lasted for about 10 minutes, but I guess that's long enough to get 1 or 2 images. It was a bit of a rush, but I really like the composition, and I love those beams of light coming through there. I've said it over and over again throughout my videos, it's all about the light, and in this case, it really is about the light. The subject could be anything really, it's just that that light really pulls this photograph off, and that's why it made my top 10. Number 6 on my list, again, is the same big leaf maple that I photographed before, number 4. This is a different time of year though. This is a little bit later in May when the leaves start to come out. I just love those vibrant greens in May and June, and it's a great time to photograph woodlands. It's not often that I can find a composition that is somewhat orderly in a massive chaos, but in this case I really liked the composition. I just wanted to fill the frame with all that green vibrant color, and I also managed to find some prominent branches that kind of fill the frame quite nicely. In this case, I used a polarizer to really saturate those colors and also get rid of some of the reflections that you might find on foliage. Photograph number 7 is an area that I'd never been to before, and that was one of the benefits of having to stick around close to home in 2020, was that it kind of forced me to search out some new areas, and Fossley Creek was one of those areas. Now, I had seen photographs on the internet of the waterfall at Fossley Creek, but I never really got that excited about it from what I saw. And it wasn't until I actually went there and explored the area that that's when I got really excited, because the area is just absolutely beautiful. Again, it has these mossy, vibrant boulders, the green, lush ferns in the background near the waterfall. I mean, it was all such a beautiful scene. One of the things you have to realize about Vancouver Island, if you do come here to photograph anything, is that 99% of the time you'll be photographing either trees or waterfalls. Now, we do have a coastline that is quite beautiful, but it's limited in kind of its epicness. There's trees and there's small cliffs, but you really have to search out those compositions. We also have some great alpine areas, but of course they're a little bit harder to get to, especially in the winter. Number 8 on my list is again another waterfall. This one was kind of a hidden gem. I just happened to see a photograph on Facebook, I believe, of this waterfall, but it didn't have a name, and the person that was showing the photograph didn't want anybody to go to this spot, which is understandable because a lot of these areas do get overrun with photographers and Instagrammers trying to get a shot. So I did a little bit of research myself, and after some careful searching around the interweb, I did find a creek name and where I could find this waterfall, and it was absolutely beautiful. I'll leave a link to the video up in the corner here. What I really loved was just the ferns surrounding this little gorge here with the waterfall at the end, and it was perfect timing on my part because there was just enough water to make it interesting. I find with some waterfalls, if you have too much water, then sometimes it doesn't look so great, and of course if you don't have enough water, it doesn't look great. So you have to have a fine balance between water flow and rocks in between the water so that you get some interest within the waterfall. But yeah, I was really happy with this photograph. I did have to do a multiple shot exposure because we had some wind happening in there with the ferns blowing around, and then of course I wanted to take a different shutter speed for the waterfall itself. But overall, I was really happy with the series of images that I got from here. Number 9 on my list is somewhat of an abstract photograph that I took in Iceland in July. It was a trip that I took with Thor, Alistair and Tom. We were really lucky to be able to pull this trip off because it was such a tight window in between travel restrictions and being able to travel. I was also very lucky to have Thor, who lives in Iceland, to take us around and show us some of his favorite areas. We concentrated more or less on the interior of Iceland, so we were able to get into the backcountry to some more obscure areas. I really like this photograph because it's such an unusual view and it takes you a little while to kind of figure out what it is. It's just an island on a lake, and then of course it has that reflected evening light surrounding it, so it creates these beautiful colors surrounding this somewhat abstract shape. And my 10th favorite image is another one from Iceland. Now I can't pronounce the name, or I won't pronounce the name because I know that I'll just butcher it, so I'll just leave it as the interior of Iceland. This was just an absolutely fantastic area, and actually it was so fantastic that we went to the spot twice. once at the very beginning of the trip and once at the end. But what I loved about this spot was just the contrast between the snow and those kind of reddish brown hills, and then of course we have these fumaroles or steam vents, and it creates all this steam coming up in different directions. So the compositions are never exactly the same. It depends where the wind's blowing and how hard it's blowing. But just an absolutely surreal, fantastic area. And I really like this photograph just for all those reasons. It's just a really cool scene that, it's just otherworldly. I'm going to throw in a bonus image here. This is bonus image number 11. I really quite like this photograph. It was one taken at Triple Falls, which is in Errington, just down the road from where I live. And what I really love about it is those swirling bubbles in the foreground. And I like the composition because I've really tried to integrate those swirling bubbles as the main foreground subject, and then the waterfall in the background is almost secondary. And that's something about photography that's really neat, is sometimes it takes a little bit of observation and time to just kind of, sit and enjoy the scene and try and figure out how can you portray this or photograph this in a way that's going to really resonate with your audience. And I think this is one of those photographs. I'll keep going to Triple Falls. It's a local area. And that's the great thing. I can just keep going back over and over again and capture it in different conditions and different light and so on. Right, well, that's my top 10 images of the year. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give me the old thumbs up, and a comment is always welcome as well. I just also wanted to say that thank you ever so much for all of the print orders. I ended up getting way more print orders than I was expecting, so please be patient as I go through all of these orders. It might take a few weeks to get them out, but they will be going out within the next few weeks. I should also mention that the top 10 images I've decided to put on sale as well with the 50,000 subs sale. So if you want to go and look at those, please do so on my website. I'll leave a link up in the corner here and down below. And I've also added a few other images on there that people requested. If you have any requests for images that you would like to see on sale, then let me know in the comments below. As far as the length of this sale, I'll probably leave the images up for, let's say, 2 weeks, and then I'll take them down, and that'll be the end of the sale until I have some other big event. All right, everybody, thanks ever so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and keep on shooting. All right, bye-bye.